My next guest in the author's studio is the hugely likeable English author Tim Weaver. Tim began his career as a video games journalist, and I'm sure that's helped him get the terrific pace that he has in his novels. It took him 10 years to get his first novel published, which came out in 2010, and he's been on a mighty roll ever since.
Yeah, I guess my number one writing tip would be when you've written a piece of work, whether it's 10,000 words or 100,000 words, put it down, leave it alone for a while. Go away for a week, a couple of weeks, a month, as long as you can possibly leave it. Go away and don't think about it at all, and then come back again, because that for me was the difference between not being published and published, because I left my book alone for 3 months after my daughter was born, and it was the best 3 months I could possibly have ever taken from that book, because before that I just couldn't get published. No one was interested in my work at all, and then after 3 months away from it, not even looking at it, I came back and looked at it and realised why no one was interested in it. It was because it was absolutely terrible. So that distance from it really allows you the opportunity to see it with fresh eyes, and I think that's important, and sometimes it can be really the difference between success and not. Well, all your books, I think, mean different things to you depending on when you wrote them and what they were about, and whether the research was really captured your imagination, all sorts of reasons for loving books. I think I do retain a special place in my heart for The Dead Tracks, which was my second book, but more because it was, I felt, quite a step up from my first book, but also through circumstances and some difficulties, it didn't get a fair crack of the whip when it came out, and not as many people got a chance to see it at the time as I would have liked. So I feel like it's one of my most overlooked books, and doesn't deserve to be, because I feel like it was a book that really was a step up from my debut. Well, I was a journalist for 18 years, so I think being a journalist taught me some useful skills, and that really, one of the skills I think is that to try and be as disciplined as possible with your writing and write to as much of a routine as possible. So I actually have a 9 to 5 routine. I sit down at my desk at about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, have a lunch break at 1 o'clock, and then I try to put down tools at 5 o'clock and try and do a proper 9 to 5 day, and I think that's important. I only write Monday to Friday. I use Saturday and Sunday to kind of, unless I'm at the end of a deadline or something like that, but I try to use Saturday and Sunday to kind of recharge my batteries a bit, and then again, that distance I was talking about earlier, Saturday and Sunday off, allow you that distance, and you come back on Monday and you're able to look at your book with fresh eyes. I think probably 3 books actually really inspired me as a writer and wanted, after reading them, I wanted to write thrillers. One was a book called A Simple Plan by Scott Smith. The second was a book called Every Dead Thing by John Connolly, and the third was a book called The Poet by Michael Connolly, and I read them all one after the other. And before that, I'd really harboured ambitions of being a writer, and after I'd read those books, I thought I definitely want to write thrillers, and I want to give it a go after reading these books. Well, I suppose my guilty pleasure is probably 80s action movies. I'm a big film fan, not just interested in watching films, but in the processes of making films and how they're put together and all that kind of stuff. But I grew up as a kid in the sort of late 80s and early 90s watching a lot of action movies, stuff like RoboCop and Predator and Terminator and all those sorts of things. And they definitely are my guilty pleasure. I love watching them. I've watched RoboCop like 40 or 50 times and try and watch it a couple of times a year. I absolutely love it. No rituals really before I start writing, other than trying to be as focused as possible before I sit down. So yeah, no rituals, just try and clear my head, sit down and try and get the business done. I don't plan books brilliantly, I've got to admit. I'm not a big planner, so I tend to just come up with an idea for a disappearance, and then from there I kind of write it, see where it takes me, and I like the books to develop organically. Where I get my ideas from, probably, because there's infinite ideas. There are tons and tons of ideas. It's just a question of picking the right ideas to use for the right book. Oh, right. And there it is. Yeah. Well, I think there are tons of ideas. You know, I mean, it is the question everyone asks, but ideas really aren't the problem. It's just knowing which ideas to use in which book. Never lost any work, or at least not a massive amount of work. So I back it up 3 or 4 times a day if I can. So yeah, always back up your work. I think pretty quickly. I mean, I think there are some books where it takes time to kind of get into it, and you accept that as long as you get your socks knocked off later on down the line. But I think you do get an idea with a book fairly quickly as to whether you're going to enjoy it or not, whether it's going to be your type of thing. I think if the author is kind of writing the way that you love to read, then you know pretty quickly that it's going to be a book that you like. And I think it's important that obviously in thriller writing, the writer grabs your attention as quickly as possible, and it doesn't have to be an explosion or a dead body or anything like that, but they just need to build a sense of dread, of alarm, of anxiety, and from that you can really, you as a reader will definitely stick with it. Always wanted to be an author, yeah, from day one. From very early on in my teens, I wanted to write books, and it was really when I started reading thrillers in my teen years, but it was really when I read those 3 books and then started to read crime fiction, especially American crime fiction was a big influence on me. That was when I realised that I really did want to be an author.
Thanks so much, Tim Weaver, and there's loads more to follow in the Author Studio.